That means. It basically means that when we're talking about lake effect, you're expecting to see a lot of times those squalls that are real narrow bands of snow that can be very intense. And we haven't seen too much of that throughout the course of today. Now, what we're going to be monitoring is the potential for that to change as we move into this evening and into tonight. So right now in downtown Cleveland, you've got a couple of these disorganized showers. They are pretty light, but there's periods of time when you get over towards Gate Mills, I-271, Beechwood, you see how that color gets a little bit deeper? That continues into Geauga and also Portage counties where you have some of that heavier snow, and another band trying to set up here to the west of Cleveland. So I'll show you what it looks like on the future radar, talk about additional totals, impacts coming up. All right. Of course, anything that is untreated could become incredibly slick at times. And what we're seeing in downtown right now, lowered visibility. When I was driving in a couple of hours ago, that was what I noticed throughout the drive. And it's very typical with lake effect, right? You're driving along and periods of time where visibility comes down and it's not that great on the roads. And then other times where it's okay. So that's what we're going to be watching, is multiple bands of lake effect snow that are starting to get their act together as we move throughout this evening. We do have that northwesterly wind setting up, eventually becoming more of a westerly wind. And it's gusty winds too, 10 to 20 miles per hour. And I'm putting the evening drive here for the next few hours at the yellow light. Maybe at times it's going into that red because of that additional snow. And snowfall totals from earlier today, these are some of our higher amounts. It's not going to look like we're seeing 4 or 5 inches of snow because we did have some melting throughout the course of today. But looking at the radar loop over the last few hours here, you can see how those northwesterly winds are starting to take shape, and all of these bands are starting to come from the northwest thanks to those northwesterly winds. And you can kind of pick out here 3 or 4 distinct bands of lake effect snow that are starting to become together. So right now in downtown Cleveland, just to the east here from Beechwood all the way down into Bainbridge, you've got this pocket of some moderate snowfall. You also have another band that's trying, it's pretty disorganized still, over in Ashtabula, another one in Erie, Pennsylvania, and then one more when you get to the west side of Cleveland. That's actually our most defined line from Doylestown up through Brunswick, continues into Lorraine. So this is what I'm going to be monitoring on the Power 5 over the next couple of hours, is when we get those bands really together where you could get maybe ½ an inch of snow per hour. And we do still have in our eastern communities these winter weather advisories until tomorrow. So looking at the future radar here, you see in about 3 hours, we're at 8 p.m., you still have these multiple bands of lake effect snow setting up. One for Ashtabula, another one from Cleveland that goes down to about Portage County, and a weaker one that's on the west and southern side. As we move throughout the evening, it'll become more like 2 and eventually 1 that's hitting Erie, Pennsylvania a lot harder, and we kind of get a break. However, we're not done. Additional lake effect snow showers certainly expected for tomorrow. It's going to be kind of an on and off thing. We'll continue to have the threat for that lake effect in Tuesday morning. Afternoon looks dry. One more burst of some light snow showers, maybe some rain mixing in at times as well. And then we have much quieter conditions. Wednesday will leave an isolated chance for rain, snow mix, still kind of getting that lake effect going. But eventually we're going to warm things up and calm things down. Also, we'll get to the fact that it's going to be gusty and feeling a lot colder. There's many parts to the forecast. Additional lake effect snow is expected for tonight, tomorrow. That's the main thing. Speaking of getting it together, we are starting to see some bands of lake effect snow starting to get their act together. We have, if you look carefully, you can see kind of 4 distinct lines. You've got one that extends, all the way down into Stark County up to Lorraine. You have another one to the east side of Cleveland that extends into Geauga and Portage County. And then it's kind of sloppy up here, but this is where we are expecting to see one pretty singular band by tonight of lake effect snow. So we are not done, and additional accumulation is possible, but not for everybody. So planning out the rest of this evening, multiple bands for the next few hours, starts to shift far east, far out. 1 a.m. Overnight, I think a lot of us are going to be pretty quiet. So I'm going to show you the future radar here coming up in just a couple of minutes, talk about how much more snow we could see coming up. To a northwesterly wind that we're dealing with. So you can see a pretty distinct one right here, particularly from basically Summit County all the way up to Lorraine, impacting Medina County, and there were some folks already got 4 inches of snow there. Then look at that. Then there's a gap. And then you see it's a little bit more disorganized still here, but we're expecting to see this become more of an intense band of lake effect snow, with snowfall rates 1/2 inch to 1 inch per hour at times, and then another one over towards Erie, Pennsylvania. Now, I do think as we move throughout the course of this evening, we're going to start to see a lot of this try to shift farther to the east, but that's what I'm going to be watching the radar, and I'm definitely watching all of our ODOT cameras very carefully as well. So this is when you look a little bit closer, like Berea, Strongsville, that darker purple blue color, that's a pretty decent snowfall rate. Same thing around Parkman, Hiram. It becomes lighter up to the north and east, but there is still snowing, and now the sun has set, which is only going to aggravate the conditions. So looking at the future radar, here we go in about 3 hours. Notice how it's trying to pull farther to the east, impacting Geauga and Portage County. Definitely looks like a pocket where we could get couple inches of some of that wet snow, and another band impacting Ashtabula and over into northwest PA. And then watch what happens as we move into the overnight. It kind of all goes over to PA, visits the neighbors for a little bit. This gives everybody a break. Then we move into early morning hours, and it tries to come back. Lake effect is fickle, you know that, and so we're going to continue to monitor these radar trends, but it continues to show up. That we'll have multiple bands for a few hours tonight, then kind of gets out of here, comes back. So we're not quite done. Even on Tuesday, where we'll have some additional lake effect snow showers, and then even one more little burst here of some very light snow into tomorrow afternoon as a quick little disturbance pushes through. By Wednesday, it's very isolated activity. Most of us will be dry. So is this going to be the worst snowfall? No, it hasn't been, but it is getting us back into the mindset of winter, and right on time too. That average first snowfall, November 10th, here we are on November 10th. Looking at those additional snowfall amounts here, notice that I want you to ignore that number right there, because I think that that's where we could get that 2 to 4 inches. Geauga, portions of Portage County, portions of Ashtabula, elsewhere, probably less than 1 inch, but it could still make it slick out on the roads. And it's only in the 20s, feeling even colder with those northwesterly winds deteriorating pretty quickly. So this is around Strongsville here, and you can see that it is accumulating on the roadways here. That band has been the most impressive over the last hour, and you're seeing that result now. Big slowdowns here. So this is I-71, and another view of that actually shows how poor the visibility can be at times. I just saw an ODOT truck go through though. Bottom line, we're getting our snow legs back. Lake effect is only going to be impacting some folks at a given time. So you look out your window and you're seeing just a few flurries. Compare that to what Berea, Brunswick, portions of Medina County, right where we're looking at those cameras, that is currently our worst situation at this moment. However, as we move throughout tonight, I think it's going to kind of take aim in that primary snow belt. Geauga, Portage County getting hit pretty hard as well. Right in that area where that camera is where we're seeing the darkest purples and blues. So that's where we really want to be careful. If you don't have to leave in Medina County right now traveling, just stay put for a little bit. I do think that we're going to see some improvements for some over the next few hours, but I'll show you what it looks like on that future radar and when we get back to the 50s, maybe even 60s. Wow. So if you're not ready for old man winter, it looks like we will have a little bit of a reprieve, but we'll get to that in just a minute.
All right, Katie, thank you.
Turnpike, it's looking like you're getting periods of time where you're getting 1 inch of snow per hour, and it's starting to accumulate on the roads. It's pretty slow around the Brunswick area, North Royalton. I have 2 areas that I'm concerned about that I have circled here. So northern Medina County, southern Cuyahoga, over into Lorain, and you see that we're looking at rainfall rate, right? It is snow. I need to change the title here, but it shows you where you have some of that heavier precipitation. At this point, that precip is all snow. And you also have another band. It's a little bit more diffuse, but there's still these areas where there's some pockets around Parkman into Geauga County, right around I-271. So a lot of our main interstates being impacted by these multiple bands of lake effect snow. Now we're flipping it just over to the regular radar, which you're used to seeing. That same area showing up from Eaton to Brunswick, that's our worst area at this moment. If you don't have to leave your house right now, don't. In Medina County in particular. Then there's a gap, and then you start to get more of that snow. I think as we move into this evening, The primary and secondary snow belt farther to the north and east, including Geauga, Portage County, portions of Ashtabula, Trumbull. That's really going to be the bullseye for where we see some additional lake effect. And then that should continue into portions of northwest PA as well. Down to the south and west, you've got some light flurries. It could make it slick, but it's not going to be nearly as intense. It's actually good to see. In the last 20 minutes, slight improvements around the Strongsville area. However, you can see that there's clearly some accumulation on the highway, and so you want to just take it easy. And I have these yellow lights here because there's going to be periods of time where it's a red, period of time when it's a green. So we're going to go yellow for the rest of this evening. Chilly temperatures and also feeling even colder. So notice here, by the time we get to 9 p.m., we're trying to shift these multiple bands of lake effect snow farther up to the north and east, impacting areas from Cleveland straight down through Youngstown, and then another band, Ashtabula into Crawford County into western PA. By the time we get to the overnight period, look at that. That would be great. Give us a little break overnight. However, I think that we'll get more lake effect as we move into tomorrow morning, potentially impacting the morning drive. By the time we get into the afternoon, we should get a break, but there's one more little disturbance that pushes through, giving us a few light snow showers. I don't think this will accumulate very much. It's truthfully the next, let's say 15 hours that we're going to be concerned. So we have tonight to worry about, looking like a break overnight, and then another round tomorrow morning as well. As we get into Wednesday, a lot of us are going to be dry, but you see that there's still some lingering lake effect, more on the rain variety at that point though. As temperatures finally start to increase, we're looking like we're going to see some upper 40s in comparison to those 30s that we've been dealing with. Another type of storm here across northeast Ohio today with some lake effect. Now, not everyone dealing with these poor conditions, but certainly taking a bullseye in northern Medina County. So this is I-71 at State Route 303. You can see that there are certainly some issues, and it changes fast. As we know with lake effect, you could be driving along, everything's fine, and then all of a sudden you get low visibility and some accumulation on the roadways, overcoming those road temperatures, which we have seen throughout the course of today. Most intense snow band here is all the way extends all the way up into Lorain County, portions of Oberlin, Grafton. You get down into the Brunswick area. It was in Strongsville. It's now sinking a little bit farther to the south. And you have other snow showers elsewhere. Another band of lake effect snow on the east side of Cleveland. So you're seeing that in portions of Geauga, that far eastern section of Cuyahoga County. So I-271, you're getting into Chesterland area. That's where it's coming down again. More of those side streets, state routes, but still several areas where people are trying to get home and conditions are not ideal. It's also snowing as you get over into Ashtabula County, northwest PA. Northwest PA is likely going to get hit the hardest tonight, but we are seeing accumulating snow, and these bands of lake effect snow are expected to continue for a few more hours. So I'm going to break down what that looks like on that future radar in a couple of minutes, but in the meantime, I'm in some light snow showers. I don't want to leave out our friends farther to the west here, but they're much lighter in comparison to what we're dealing with around Medina, Lorain County. That has been our most impressive band of lake effect snow, where you're seeing it overcome road temperatures. We also are starting to see the second line here that extends from basically the east side of Cleveland all the way into Geauga County around Middlefield here, Mayfield getting impacted by that. Also starting to see some slushy accumulations. While it doesn't look overly impressive at this moment for Ashtabula, I think as we get into this evening, you're going to be more in the bullseye at that point. So right now, looking at, we're going to do a little radar tour here, where we're dealing with snow showers all the way up into Vermilion. You get to Oberlin, Grafton, all the way to Brunswick. That's where we have the most intense part of that lake effect snow band. Then there's a little gap and you get the next round. Here's the area right around I-271 that's a little concerning here when you're seeing those darker purples and blues. That's where you're seeing more intense snowfall rates, visibility lower, covering the roads, and then it continues. I mean, this is pretty fat here. South Russell all the way over to Burton, continues into Parkman. That is another distinct band kind of a mess up to the north and east in Ashtabula, northwest PA. But as I mentioned, I do think that we're going to see some of the more intense snow bands in a couple of hours in Ashtabula and Trumbull counties. This is what it looks like right now on some of our area roads. There is snow on the actual highway. I see some ODOTs out there, ODOT trucks, trying to keep it clear. But bottom line, over the course of the next few hours, you have to be aware of the fact that this is a potential low visibility, incredibly slick roads. I have the yellow lights here for the next several hours, all the way until about midnight or so. This is what future radar shows us. 10 o'clock, you get two bands here showing up on the future radar, pulling up to the north and east as winds become a little bit more westerly. When you have a westerly wind, that favors northwest PA more so than Ohio. So it does look like Ashtabula, Trumbull, northwest PA, dealing with some of that heavier snow from about 10 to 1. Overnight, we might get a break, everybody, but it's a brief break. Additional lake effect snow is expected as we move into tomorrow morning, potentially impacting that morning drive as well. Additional accumulation, we're going to have huge ranges of snow. Not a huge surprise there. There could be a couple of folks, though, that get 3-4 inches of snow. That's particularly true in Geauga and also Portage counties, and then also